Hey guys, welcome to episode number 6 of Good for the Soul. In this episode, I sat down with David Thomas. He is one of my coaches. He came to Ivan's about 5 years ago already as a black belt. He's been in Jiu Jitsu for 25 plus years, been in martial arts his whole life. He owned his own school in Austin, Texas for 14 or 15 years before coming up to Seattle. He's a friend, a mentor. He's guided me on and off the mats and has such a interesting view and perspective of jiu-jitsu, right? The real art form of it that is used in the practical sense. Hey, for competing, self-defense. Hey, we're gonna do jiu-jitsu for what it was intended for. At least that's my perspective of it. It was also really cool to have him at the gym the last 5 years because he brought a pure jiu-jitsu gym's perspective to Ivan's, where I think we needed that at the time. Whereas at Ivan's, sometimes we can be focused on MMA, boxing, submission grappling, the no-gi side of things, the wrestling, other than just pure jiu-jitsu. So having him on the mats was an incredible experience, as well as he has a smaller man game. So he taught me many lessons over the years of not using strength over technique, being able to really refine certain details to my game to help make it better. And I think he was such a positive impact on the gym over the last 5 years. So guys, I'm super excited to share this with you because I think it's an awesome conversation. And before we jump into that, guys, I want to remind you that if you go to jockofuel.com, you can get 10% off on the supplements, the greens, the protein shakes, all the good stuff. All right, I've already been using it for years prior to being able to partner with them. So I'm stoked to be able to share this opportunity with you guys. You can get 10% off on checkout if you put in the code Good for the Soul, as well as on the originusa.com side of things. So the gis, which are all American made, rash guards, clothing, apparel, all the cool stuff that I wear all the time. So check it out, jockofuel.com and originusa.com for 10% off. Use the code Good for the Soul. And without further ado, here is the episode with David Thomas. Coach, pleasure sitting down. Thank you so much. I know you're a busy guy. I appreciate you helping me out on this project. And when you came to Ivan's 5 or 6 years ago now,
yeah, 5.
We clicked right away.
Yeah,
it happened fast. I was like, oh, damn, I have a lot to learn from you. So I really appreciate you sitting down with me before you take off on your new adventure and I take off on mine. So it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
To start from the beginning, where does your love and passion for jiu-jitsu come from?
Man, a long time ago. So I've been doing martial arts for 30 plus years, and striking arts. Back in the day, there was there was wrestling, but the grappling sports hadn't really invaded the U.S. Dominated the U.S. So I was, karate. So I got a black belt in karate, and I really actually felt it was limited, very limited. I was competing a lot, and realized that there's just a lot of dogma around technique, and people were like worried about your fist should be here and not there. It was just really weird. And I started taking Aikido because I thought karate was kind of bullshit after that.
Yeah. And
Aikido, frankly, wasn't great for me, but it was different. And the most important thing that came out of Aikido was there was actually a mat in the Aikido dojo. And so a buddy of mine named Marco, and this is back in 1992, I would say, 1992. He and I would stay after class and just go at each other. And it was the first time I'd ever discovered that grappling, wrestling, that close contact, was just a pure joy. I mean, and of course the Aikido students would be aghast. That would be, because Aikido is super passive, and so we'd be like trying to kill each other. Yeah. And it wasn't jiu-jitsu, but it was grappling, and man, the fire just took off. And after that, I asked some other coaches like, what's out there, and they mentioned jiu-jitsu, and so yeah, it eventually evolved to be finding a grappling school in Austin. It wasn't really a jiu-jitsu school. There was, the coach was a Muay Thai and Greco guy. But we were grappling on the ground. We actually didn't even have mats, dude. Grappling on hardwood. I'm not kidding you. Yeah. We'd also go out front in the grass and grapple in the grass.
Which was a little bit softer.
And literally traffic would stop. Yeah, and then we of course, heard about Royce Gracie and imported a brown belt from Brazil. He got into some immigration trouble, so he couldn't stay with us for long. So it was really this there just was nobody had training. There was obviously no certification. Nobody had belts. But man, the fire was lit the first time I got on the mat.
So going back just a little further, had you did you, I mean, was that your complete first exposure to combat sports? Like, you didn't wrestle in high school? Did you have brothers wrestling at home? And what was?
Well, so I grew up back in the day where you like actually played outside all day, and you play, tackle football with no pads and just, so very much a roughhousing childhood. And this is a really important point, because I think the ability to find, physical intimacy and physical aggression non-intimidating. It keeps a lot of people out of the sport who don't grow up in that world where you can do that. And so yeah, there wasn't a martial art. Well, actually, that's not true. I took judo when I was a kid, but it didn't last. But combat sports, I did Muay Thai. I did Jeet Kune Do. So I loved getting hit in the face. I mean, it was all. I mean, but a very different vibe, right?
Yeah.
Like jiu-jitsu was a whole different thing, and we all know, like, we can love getting hit in the, punching and kicking, and we can also love grappling.
Yep.
But it was very different for me, because I'm a smaller guy, and there's always so much power I could, put behind my fist, and I was getting, kicked in the nuts all the time in Muay Thai, and that's really, it was kind of wearing me down.
Yeah.
And so, there was definitely an opportunity for me to find something new. And again, you know how it goes, man. This, like, your heart just explodes. You're so passionate about the grappling sports. So, yeah, it took off, man.
What has been, maybe jumping too far forward to say the least, what has been the best way you found it as a coach to explain that feeling you're describing to new people that we want to bring into the sport?
Yeah. Well, so it kind of depends on who they are, right? So for frankly, for women and other people who haven't necessarily grown up in a world where when physical proximity is oftentimes really intimidating.
Yeah.
Then it can cause you to freeze up. And so it kind of depends on who you're working with.
Right.
If it's a young 20-year-old kid, I want to get out there and I want to beat his ass and just show him that someone who's older than his dad can just wreck him. But as an inspiration, not as an ego thing, but as an inspiration, because when you have this wonder of how the hell did you do this, and you know how it goes, man. What just happened to me?
Yep.
And I'll never forget the first time I got mounted when I was in my very, very first class. And I was like, it was just like, what just happened? And so I think you want to create a sense of safety and opportunity for really small people who may not have been physically aggressive in their lives before, and then a whole different game for a young man, and then for an older guy, depends on what their background is. I think you really need to get to know the person inside of it.
Gotcha.
I am not a one-size-fits-all coach. Cool. I really am not.
That's great, and I've seen you on the mats teach that, because it flows out very naturally. I mean, you've been a black belt as long as I've been training jiu-jitsu, so yeah, so it's cool to really see that experience, especially talking to you into individuals who were around before YouTube and internet. You did jiu-jitsu before it was cool to do jiu-jitsu. You know what I mean? So it's really cool to hear your progression and style. So I think in this next question, two phases. What did jiu-jitsu mean to you at that time in your life, and what does jiu-jitsu mean to you now, or how it's ebbed and flowed throughout your life?
Yeah, no, great question. So I got into martial arts initially because my dad used to beat me up, and I was afraid of him, and I just didn't want him ever putting his hands on me ever again. And so I started taking karate because that's all there was. So initially, really, it was truly for self-preservation, and frankly to kind of put a label on myself that might intimidate somebody away from wanting to mess with me. It was so, build a wall or whatever. Of course, that completely changes. When you develop mastery, and mastery, it really is a gift. I recall, and I was probably a purple belt when I realized this. I realized, wow. By the way, I was a purple belt for 6 years. So it's like, I was a very seasoned purple belt. And I realized it kind of dawned on me all of a sudden that I'm actually really good at something for the first time in my life. And it was, and I treated it exactly what it was. It was a gift, an absolute gift. And then by the time I was a brown belt, I realized I have more in my head than I could ever possibly use. Well, luckily I started teaching when I was a purple belt. Yeah. And so initially, and maybe I'm answering the wrong question here. I mean, getting to a point of mastery is not, for me, was no longer about self-preservation or self-defense. It became about, how can I get this stuff out of my head? Because one, I'm a pretty passive guy. I don't go looking for fights like some people I know.
Hopefully we're all past that stage.
It's all good. It's all good. But you know, we're different. Everyone's different, man. And because I'm passive, even today I'm likely to walk away from a physical encounter, even though clearly not necessary, but a good idea. So yeah, I really believe that knowing how to fight well is not a means is not an end in itself, right? It is something that I realize I must now give away. And dialing back, back in the beginning of the YouTube era, if you're looking at video now, I mean, it was probably 1995. No, it's not true. Maybe 99 or something when I started videotaping some of my techniques. And I remember I just started teaching. It was like 2002, and I started publishing my techniques online. And one of the coaches in Austin, he thought I was crazy. He's like, "What are you doing? You're giving away all the secrets. People are gonna know, your best moves." And I was like, we clearly had a disagreement. He was actually he was angry with me for my techniques, not his techniques. But he was like, it just felt like it was breaking the secret code or something. And he was really offended. And I realized, we wouldn't see eye to eye on it because I wanted to give it away because I want to inspire other people. Right. And I want to take what's in my head and you put it into the world around me. And you see that, when I'm teaching, I just want to get it out of my head.
Yeah. Absolutely. Did you know at that time, you're starting to put things on the internet, right? No one's telling you to do that. Did you know or have an idea of how big jiu-jitsu was going to become?
No, I had no idea. But, well, I mean, I certainly knew that when I knew people like me who had caught that fire as well, and there was this ridiculous passion that I'd never experienced before, I'd never seen other people experiencing. But like by the time I found jiu-jitsu, it was my fourth or fifth martial art. I'd never found a group of any martial artists that were that just completely nuts, and just completely into it. Yeah. And so, I could have predicted it, but, I wasn't really thinking about. I was thinking very locally, frankly. Like I was trying to open up my own school. Why did I open up my own school? I opened up my own school to attract other students to my gym. I had a kids program. I had two very young kids.
What year did you open your first school?
My school, I opened in 2003. But I'd been teaching about a year and a half before that at another school, kind of like preparing my catalog, if you will. I was teaching for one of Henzo's gyms in Austin. And it was, but kind of there was like a dual reason. One, it was selfish because my kids had been studying martial arts, jiu-jitsu, and they were like yellow belt kids at the time. And I thought, gosh, if I start teaching and I put a mat out there, parents are going to bring their kids, and my kids are going to have this unlimited supply of training partners, and that's just a great way of growing up. I thought, like imagine growing up on the mats.
I actually did. My dad taught karate for 45 years, the old school, so hitting each other with the swords and mats everywhere.
and it was a great place it created a playful atmosphere, and of course all those kids did show up, and I taught a kids program for 10 years, and my kids just had a ridiculous amount of mat time, and that was a gift as well. And then of course teaching adults became a very different passion for me.
No, that's very exciting. So you've been coaching for a long time, and again you said maybe we tailor it to the individual of how to share that excitement, but maybe what are some of the either themes you hear from individuals, male or female, to really get them through the door? Like what is something that someone may hear if they've never heard of or tried jiu-jitsu before that may sound familiar to me. I'm willing now to take the leap.
Well, I'll tell you the same thing. It's funny, I just tell parents this, but I think this is super applicable for anybody that wants to study in jiu-jitsu. The reasons that you fight, or the reasons that you have to use violence, they're so varied. It's not, and it's oftentimes we're hammered, whether it's media or stories of rape or stories of mugging. We always think it's this extreme situation where it's life or death. And that's absolutely not the case. That's a very, very tiny percentage of situations. Your Green Lake thing is a great example of that. When you put the guy on the ground in Green Lake, your life wasn't in any way threatened. And so so what I call this, if you think about Muay Thai, which I think is an amazing sport, Karate, amazing sport, you know. But you have a binary option. I'm either going to strike you and knock your teeth down your throat, which is an incredibly violent situation, and it's a binary solution, because I can't not, if I don't strike you, there's nothing happening.
Right.
Right. And if I just kind of barely strike you, what's the point of that? And so it's either like 100% or 0%. And so it's a binary option. Jiu-Jitsu, you have what I call a continuum of force. And this is a knob that you can dial as high as you need to, whether it is that you're just restraining somebody, right? And for a parent who's worried about their kid getting into trouble because, oh, you teach my kid karate, I'm going to get someone's orthodontics bill because my kid, as soon as my kid gets shoved on the playground, he's going to like roundhouse kick you in the mouth. You know, as opposed to, how about a double leg takedown, son?
Right.
And just sit there, just sit on him.
Yep.
You know,
no,
what a great solution,
yeah.
right? And frankly, there is a sense of compassion and empathy that comes with that method that you simply can't find in striking arts. There's no way. Now, granted, there'll be, you know, a Krav Maga guy will say, oh, a little pressure point here, and okay, fine, but you know, you're not going to stop the fight.
Of course.
Just not. And so that's a sales. It's a truth, but it's also a sales pitch. So if your question is how you drawing them in, you want to kind of evolve this fear tactic of, oh, you're worried about being raped, right? It's like, really, is that the opening line you're going to have when a woman walks into the gym?
That's not the best.
It's not the best, and it's like how life insurance, they want you to think about death, you know. It's an extreme scenario, and I don't think we need to do that. And then of course, I think the community, the physical fitness aspects, there's just a whole slew of reasons that you go to sell. But I really think that the distinguishing characteristic, in addition to the continuum of force, is the fact that you are constantly competing against someone who's resisting fully against you. Right. And this is, now judo shares this as well, right? You know, jiu-jitsu is not the only sport where every time you train, you're working against somebody who's resisting fully against your technique. So you're going to know whether your technique is good or whether your technique sucks. And so that, you know, I think that's a great sales pitch, because again, karate, I spent, you know, 12 years in karate. Kata, no one's resisting. Right. You know, so I don't know if this punch works. I just know that it looks great in the mirror and it sounds great when it pops. Right? But that's, you know, the continuum of force thing, I think is really essential. I think it also takes a couple of other things from judo. I think judo, well, maybe not. Let me dial this back a bit. I have yet to see a martial art that is a true meritocracy. And so, let's say you come in and maybe you studied karate for a while, or it kind of depends on the person, because again, you're going to dial in the message based on the person that walks in. But in a lot of karate gyms or dojos, you'll see a bunch of like old fat black belts, you know, and they're barking orders, and you know that like half the guys in the gym could knock their teeth down their throat because they can't even move anymore. You know, and so it is no longer a meritocracy if you simply kind of show up and you get promoted. And jiu-jitsu, and I would love MMA and jiu-jitsu. I can't think of another sport where you simply can't advance unless you can beat people at and above your level. You know, and so in terms of fairness, that's a great sales pitch.
Correct.
It's like I'm not going to give you a black belt if you just show up. When you get a black belt, you've earned it, and you know that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Definitely. I don't know it yet, but hopefully one day I'll get there. No, I really like what you said about the continuum of force, because especially, you know, people with kids is, do you want to drop the nuclear bomb every time someone does something wrong? Or the small situations people don't think about, oh, hey, someone's just being aggressive and kind of bumping you in an elevator or stairwell, and you can know how to properly respond in a minimal situation that's not potentially life-threatening, or, you know, coworker pushes you, puts their hands on you. You don't have to punch or strike them. There's ways to de-escalate, and we're able to do that through jiu-jitsu. So that's such a great way to frame it to the outside mind, where it's like, well, why don't you just smack them around and then it's over?
And talk to a lawyer, right? A lawyer would agree with you. You know, if you get shoved and you punch a guy, this other guy's going to sue you, and he's probably going to win because it was a disproportionate response. And you know, if that's all you're learning and that's all you're training for, you're not in a great legal situation. You're not able to understand that there's a knob there. That knob also comes in handy as a coach and as a brown belt who's beating up on purple belts all the time, or a brown belt who's teaching a new white belt by rolling with them, you can dial it down. I mean, this is incredibly important. This continuum of force comes in handy in coaching in that imagine yourself as a white belt being taught by a black belt, and that person's going 100%. There's light years between those two skill levels, and that person, frankly, is saying, well, this is hopeless. I can never be that good, right? And so the black belt would never do that unless the black belt's a total tool. So, he's going to dial it way down. And you've heard me say this on the mats. I want you to be challenging your partner just beyond their ultimate ability, right? Not way beyond, because that's being a dick, right? And we know that. Just beyond. And that way, if that person really reaches and really presses, they're going to be able to see, oh, okay, this works for me. This might actually work. Otherwise, it's really demotivating. Yeah, no, absolutely. I felt it before. For some reason, I kept going back. But that thing that you're describing, because I have been coaching for a little bit myself as well, rolling just above that line, and it also makes people feel the feeling you're describing where they get to that level and they maybe not necessarily catch you in submission, but they get something, and because of the way you were rolling, it was a valid catch. Yeah. They get you in a sweep, a takedown, or something. So it validates their jiu-jitsu. Right. It validates the process. Right. So that's such a great point to bring up. Yeah. So now let's say, again, we brought people into the mats. They're excited about jiu-jitsu. We've all heard about the blue belt blues, right? Yeah. What is a way that we can stop that? Or from this blue belt blues, how do we keep people on the mats for longer? And maybe what are the reasons that you've heard over the years? People are in 2 to 3 years, they get a blue belt. Why are they leaving, and how do we keep those people on the mats? Yeah. No, that's important. One, you got to keep training. You just got to keep training, and I think it's important that you talk to every, and you've seen this, I guarantee you. I'm kind of quantitative. Everything's like a graph to me, right? Mm-hmm. And there's this period of time where you join and you ramp up like crazy. Right, so you go up this great slope of learning, and you're gobbling up new technique, and you're building your arsenal very quickly, and then of course you start to plateau. Yep. And that plateau is of varying lengths. That plateau may be a few weeks, it may be a few months, maybe a year long, and that's where you start losing people, because they're thinking, well, that's all there is for me here. And I think it's important that you talk to folks about, listen, every plateau will end eventually, and think about how many plateaus I've been through. In my career, lots of them. So that's one thing, is to set expectations that there's always growth and rebirth after periods of kind of, after you flatline a bit. The second thing I would warn blue belts about is to find something that really is yours, that you do really well, that that's captured your attention. It's a technique that you get everybody with. It's something that distinguishes you. It starts to develop your brand, because then at least when you're showing up on the mats, you're showing up with something that's a part of you, and not like, oh, my coach is really good at triangle chokes or guillotines, and so am I, and I don't really feel a sense of individuality here, and so I'm just a cookie cutter, and I'm in a plateau. I quit, And so, for me as a blue belt, I'll never forget this reverse armbar from side control. Man, I was getting everybody with it for. Wait, hang on. A reverse armbar from side control. Yeah. Okay, you're gonna have to show me that sometime. And it started because I have a long torso, which means my side control tends to be really solid. And so once I was like, okay, cool. I actually can hold people down. What do I do when I'm here? Oh, cool. I just need a technique. And I discovered this is the one I was hitting everybody with. And there's a pattern to that, which we can talk about later, as to like, why is that a particularly effective move coming from me? But again, I immediately, because nobody else in my gym was using that technique, I immediately felt like, oh, okay, cool. I've already started to develop my own little micro brand of jiu-jitsu that feels right to me. And I think that'll keep people engaged as well. And then the last thing I would say is, like, everybody gets injured, and so many people quit after injury. And there's a number of reasons they quit. One is they get dispirited. Two, they're afraid. Three, they're afraid of getting injured again. 3, they're afraid of their opponents beating their ass after they've been off the mats for 6 weeks, right? And so, but I think this is all about expectation setting. We are all on that same journey. Every one of us has gotten injured multiple times, and every one of us has been like, oh man, when I go back on the mats, they're gonna wreck me. I'm out of shape. I'm worried about my knee, and there's this, like, why am I afraid? I was never afraid before I got injured, and then then they quit. Get in front of them. tell them that you had that same experience, right? They're going to feel, okay, this, you know, my clan, I'm part of this clan of people who's going through this really difficult grind. And I think that keeps people engaged as well.
Cool. No, that's great. Yeah, I know you've been through some injuries. I've been through some myself. Yeah. You brought up something that I haven't discussed anytime recently is that plateauing, right? Which is really important. Also for anything outside jiu-jitsu, you know, anything you're trying to progress in. Do you have any specific ways or techniques that you may use to say, hey, this, I know I'm in one. Absolutely. How am I going to get out of this? Absolutely.
And let me tell you, it's often, this is such a great question, dude. This is the difficulty. A lot of people feel, especially when you're a brown belt or even a purple belt, like a purple belt that's starting to get a little tattered, a brown belt that's starting to get a little tattered, a black belt. You feel like you're supposed to be an original, right? Or some people do.
Yeah.
And you know, well, gosh, you know, if I'm going it alone, again, this gets back to the whole, like, make sure they understand that they're part of a bigger story, a story bigger than themselves. We've all been, you know, we've been, you know, I wrote this chapter 10 years before you've experienced this chapter,
yeah.
Right? You know, making sure that they are, yeah, that they understand that they're a part of something bigger.
How to get out of the plateau.
Yeah. So this individuality, this creativity, it doesn't have to come from inside. Like, you're not, yes, of course you're going to invent moves now and then, or at least you think you've invented them.
It's been done.
Right, but that's a spark, but that's a rare spark that happens in a plateau.
Right.
It's just, and so what I'm getting at is you want to go looking for other stuff, right? And so, you know, if you like, what have I been looking at recently, like, or what's inspired me recently? Not that I'm in a plateau, but, you know, going off and finding that fighter who has got a move that you haven't seen before, and you're like, damn it, I'm going to try that. That is an entirely unoriginal thing. I'm stealing a move from somebody else, but I'm now going to get on the mats and I'm going to try it, and it's going to create a spark, and it's going to remind me that there's this whole other thing that I hadn't tried before. And you know, in my head, I'm thinking about Gordon Ryan with his heavy hands. He's got these heavy hands. He's putting on everybody's heads, not just from standing, but on the ground. You know, on the ground, he's just wrecking people. You know, getting up under their armpits and cranking their heads sideways and from the feet. You know, constantly tugging on the head. And, like, you know, try that and be like, holy shit! Like, this really negatively affects the performance of your opponent. They can't get their footing when you keep tugging on their head. They don't understand when you're going to be coming in for the leg or the arm drag.
Yeah.
And so I think that don't be creative. Get out on YouTube. You know, again, YouTube wasn't around when I started, but get out on YouTube. You don't need to buy DVDs. You just don't need to. Go to Flow Grappling, man, and watch some fights and really be like, why are these guys always winning? What are these guys doing? And let me try. Let me get on the mats. Let me try that. And go do little grappling labs. Like, you know, meet a buddy after class. You know, go to an open mat and be like, this is something we're going to go through this grind. You know, when I first started, my favorite move that I've ever invented is called a taffy puller hamstring crush, and it's a move that came out because I was working on leg attacks for hours and hours every single weekend. I was meeting with a partner, and I was just, you know, of course, doing all the basic, you know, leg entanglement moves. And then this thing just kind of came out of it. And that only happened because I was inspired by Danaher Death Squad, you know, and Eddie Cummings and all these other guys. And like, okay, you know, so from that unoriginal moment where you're taking something, you will be able to break through and find your own deal. But you got to get in there and have grappling labs.
Yeah, that's such a great point, because there's so much info out there. But I'm thinking about two experiences for myself. One, watching Flow Grappling, and Gary Tonin has a way of getting out of frontside headlocks from standing or turtle position that I had never seen done the way he did it. So I recorded it and was like, hey, I have to go try this. And now it's a part of my game. And then maybe I'll throw on my own little twist of it. And then similarly, Chaz, one of my best friends, black belt, we call one of his favorite moves the chars, right? Bottom side control, get your hand in and boom, come out the other side for Dars. Well, he obviously did that to me for years. And then finally I figured out, okay, well, if I put my hand here, I may not get it done to me all the time. Well, when I started playing with it, I figured out a way, instead of a catch move, I could force it by, with my bottom side leg or my top side arm, reach up, grab my shin, and start prying myself out to get to the same point. So it was his move, but I put a little twist on it to make it my own as well. That at least worked for me. So, which again kind of helps keep jiu-jitsu continuously interesting. Because I think maybe that plateau that we feel at different times is when maybe your curiosity has faded a little bit, or you forget to be doing research and be creative with jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, it's actually kind of interesting that I've stuck with jiu-jitsu long, not because of jiu-jitsu itself, but because of me. I am actually really professionally a very restless person. I change jobs all the time. I mean, I can't tell you how many jobs I've had. And, I have done nothing in my life longer than raise my children. In fact, I started jiu-jitsu before my son was born. He's 25 now. And jiu-jitsu. Those are the only two things I've had in my life, like forever. And you can't get rid of your kids. Like, you can't get rid of your kids forever. And so it is actually a very unique part of my life that has created this, stability that I frankly haven't paused to consider why that's the case. Yeah.
Darn, because the next question was going to be why.
I mean,
if you had to guess, I mean, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
The absolute passion. I don't know what it's like for other people. I only know what it's like for me. And what I mean by this is I'm a small guy. And so jiu-jitsu does something for me that maybe it doesn't do for a bigger guy or for a woman. I don't know. And there's just something about my body type. Again, I don't know how many martial arts I've trained in, 6 or 7 different martial arts. I quit them just like I quit jobs.
Right.
I was just like, no, that's not good for me. And I spent 8 years this and 7 years and that. I mean, I didn't just like walk in and out. I gave it a fair shake.
Yeah.
Aikido 4 years. I was like, bah, I'm done. But still, even that, that's a pretty long time to give to a sport that you're kind of like, am I learning how to fight right now, or is this just kind of fun? So I have to think that it's purely a result of this match. This kind of. You find a life partner that you stick with for a long time, your whole life or whatever. There's this chemical match. There's this click, and for me, there's just something about my body type and something about the dynamism of no-gi grappling, especially, that I think is just perfect for me. Perfect. When I am on the mats moving like that, it's just heaven. It's flow. Cool. It's tremendous. Yeah.
So when you are on the mats, what maybe different phases of your life? What is currently your game? Yeah. What do you like? Maybe favorite submission that you hunt for, and just overall game and style.
Well, so I'm small, and so my game.
Hang on, which is a mean thing to say, because you say you're small, but you feel like you're 400 pounds on me when you get on mount. I'm like, I've never felt pressure like this.
Yeah, but I mean, but if I was larger, I would have a different game, right? And in fact, I would tell you that being small is a gift, because I'll get back to your question, but when you're really big and strong, and I've had students, I've got a black belt named Dan. He's massive. He's an incredibly strong guy, and when you have strength like that, it may be the case that you, especially early on. Now he's a black belt. He's way past this. This isn't about Dan. It's about bigger guys, or super strong guys that can rely upon their strengths. When you start off and you're incredibly strong, you have a lot of success because you're strong, not because you're doing technique right.
Correct.
Right? Or you can avoid submission a lot of ways because you're just an ape. And that's a problem, right? Because you're not forced to get deep into understanding the leverage, the technique, why the physics of jiu-jitsu, because you have this physical gift that you walked into the mats with. I didn't have that. I was walking around 145 pounds when I started jiu-jitsu, and now I'm 155, so not much bigger. And so that so okay, fine. I'm smaller, so I had to think about technique. And so it's funny. Last time I was rolling with Dean Coys, who who I would kind of describe as a shaved buffalo. I mean, the guy's he's just like he's this anchored monster. He's huge, and he and I are rolling. And after a few attempts, he kind of commented. He's like, it's really smart of you not to let me get on top of you. And I'm like, well, yeah, there's a reason for that, because if you got on top of me, you would kill me. I mean, there's no way I could get out from under him. I might be able to survive for a minute, but he would kill me. And so, but because I'm small, I can be faster, but I'm very, very focused on opening moves, because I know I have to be on top. I have to be on top. And by the way, this is an incredibly important thing when you're teaching self-defense. When I'm teaching a group of beginners, I'm like, hey, guard's cool. I'm going to teach you a lot about guard, but when we're talking about a self-defense situation, I don't want you to think about guard.
Right.
I want you to be thinking about scrambling to the top, scrambling to the top, scrambling to the top. And scrambling to the top means a complete awareness of opening moves. And so a lot of work on hand work, or thinking about their feet, like, whether it's an ankle pick from the knees or what have you. And so, number one, don't get to the bottom.
Yeah.
Or don't get to the bottom. Sure, grappling with you or a buddy, I'm gonna like, cool, man, I'm gonna get in side control. We're gonna play. I'm talking about like how do you distinguish yourself, taking the physical assets that you have that you can't change. I mean, this shape is you.
Yep.
How can I maximize my jiu-jitsu knowing I have that? Well, the way I've done it for my size, opening moves, absolutely never let somebody get on top. Now, yes, I'm strong, but I'm not the strongest person on the mats. I'm also the oldest person on the mats. I mean, I started relatively late. I don't know how old I was. I was like 29 when I started jiu-jitsu, and so now I'm like mid-50s, right? And so I'm like literally as old as everyone's dad in there. And so I'm, relatively small, relatively weak, I would say, and old. So like, what do I do with that? Well, so I have to focus on equalizing moves, and So number one, if you're scrambling, position, control, submission, right? If you're scrambling, you're going to end up on top. If you're going to end up on top, that means you have to have a really, really good side control and a really, really good mount, which is, hey, fundamentals, right? Yep. I've got a really, really good side control and a really, really good mount. Now, once I get there, what are the things that can equalize strength, right? So I always talk, and you've heard me say this over and over again, anything that takes the head off axis.
Yes.
I will weaken you from the mount by pulling your head sideways, by smashing your chin sideways, and so that's going to reduce your ability to explode because a huge guy, if I'm not really on my game, a huge guy, he's gonna bump me off of him, right? So I've got to be doing something that's disabling that ability, and so I want to I talk about this a lot when I'm teaching. I want to drain the life force out of people when I'm rolling with them, and the only way you do that is just with this absolute dominant pressure from the top. Now, submissions, I tend to go for things that are somewhat unconventional because why? I like to surprise people. Everyone's has gotten the arm bar from mount on them, 500 times, so they've got really good defense for arm bar from mount. So I don't go after, I go after it, but not often, right? I tend to go after, smaller joint moves. I love wrist locks. I love toe holds. I love heel hooks. I love knee bars. I want to go after moves where, you're going after that joint. It's been a while since someone attacked that joint. Maybe my defense isn't super good there.
Cool.
And so I like to kind of go, every one of your joints is at risk right now, not just the obvious ones. Yeah, so I think great scramble, top game, great position, and then go for unconventional submissions against small joints.
I like that. Yeah. And then that actually reminded me why I do that every time I'm on top now, whether it's from side control or mount, where I just slightly try and continuously keep someone's head off axis, because that was from you.
It's great.
And another funny thing, one of your unconventional submissions I used to catch with a bunch when you came up here was the bicep crusher from bottom side.
Yeah.
And I was always getting caught by it because the way I try to, wrap the legs and weave in, and it was always those unconventional things. And I forget if it was you as well who may have told me, hey, I'm just going to take all four of my limbs and focus on one of yours and create something weird because it's outside of the norm of jiu-jitsu, which creates new scrambles, and I can get out of certain positions like that. So there's these concepts I've learned from you that have really helped change my game and progress it down the road fully. Great. So I appreciate that.
I'm glad to hear that. Very glad to hear that.
As a coach, being on the mats, what is something or maybe a theme that you like and or dislike about? Maybe it's the culture of jiu-jitsu, maybe it's a technique you're seeing, or attitudes. What are some positives and negatives as a coach and maybe a room of 10 to 20 people that you're seeing?
Yeah, okay. So one, we're always so good. We continue to grow. To your point earlier, could I have seen it be, everybody? When I started, people would be like, "What? You do Taekwondo again?" Like they knew that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu must have been some martial art, but they didn't know what it was. And now, of course, you could tell you bump into anybody in the street, you say, I train Jiu-Jitsu, they're gonna be like, oh yeah, that's cool, man. I just tried that, or I want to do that, and you're like, oh. And so everyone knows about it now, which is really cool. So the constant growth of the sport, but think about what happens when things grow, right? It's funny, like if you look at how someone has a really great idea. And that thing, and people are attracted to that great idea, and like a magnet, and then there's this just frothy, you know, culture that develops around this thing, you know, whether that, and that could be religion, it could be anything.
Yeah.
What invariably happens is fragmentation, invariably, right? Yeah. And that's because ultimately people are going to start asking questions about that original idea, where they find some fundamental disagreements.
Yeah.
That fracturing. This is interesting. That is a good thing, right? I think a lot of people would suggest, oh yeah, the fracturing is bad, and you know, but it's a good thing because you know, I'm very much kind of a free market economics kind of guy, and the free market allows people to be free agents and to bring their own ideas in the mix. And so, you know, whether it's something, you know, really big names like 10th Planet or DDS, where they clearly have created significant innovation and fractured the sport.
Yeah. They
have literally fractured the sport to the point where, like, in the beginning, early days, you know, like the old school JiuJitsu guys were actually, you know, pretty nasty about Eddie. Like they were just like super non-supportive of that jam, right?
I've heard some of that history.
Yeah, and then you also see what happens, you know, like in judo where they change the rules because people are coming in and grabbing your legs, and it's like, oh, we don't like that, and so you know it's a threat.
Yeah.
But that fragmentation is the source of that fragmentation in jiu-jitsu is creativity, it's innovation, and what you'll end up with is, of course, just like in any situation where you have fragmentation, is that the progressive elements of that culture that have broken off are going to attract a different type of personality, a different type of athlete, a different type of person. And then the conservative elements, right, the traditional elements, are going to they're going to stay behind. And then ultimately you have to ask the question, well, does there need to be a winner? No, there doesn't need to be a winner. Like these old school Gi-Jits guys, awesome. I love Gi, man. I love Gi to death. And they're very, very traditional, and they do the bowing, and then you go to Eddie's place, and it's like dirty jokes before class, and you know that would be completely uncool. And so I think it's a very, very positive thing. The sport's going to continue to evolve, and that gets back to because it's a meritocracy, right? Because someone whipped your ass in that competition with something you've never seen before. You want to go learn that thing.
Yeah.
Right. And definitely. That's a new branch in the tree of jiu-jitsu. So I think that's incredibly positive. Another thing I think is positive is coming from this weird YouTube story I told you about. You know, I think there was a time in jiu-jitsu, and I still think there's some people who are very protective, but you know, now that information is everywhere, right? There was a time where, like, I remember I was training to go with my first Pan Ams. Okay. I was a blue belt, and I decided, because, you know, back then blue belt was, you know, one of the top ranks in the city of Austin. There was like, you know, there was no purple belts back then. Well, actually there's one purple belt, and he was the guy I was training under, and he had moved from a different city. So really it was just a bunch of blue belts. And so how are you going to get ready to go to the Pan Ams when you've been fighting a bunch of these same guys in your gym forever, and you're the highest ranked guy in the gym? Well, I went to other gyms.
Right.
Of course I went to other gyms, and I rolled with their coaches, because those coaches were blue belts also, and they had different games, and so I was preparing myself. Well, my coach found out about this, and he was completely offended. Completely offended that, well, he was almost like I slept around with my girlfriend. I mean, he was you know, frankly jealous, and his feelings were hurt. And I think that's a very old and negative view of information needs to be set free. It needs to be set free. That's why I published all my techniques to the web. And so I think that it's a positive transformation, that there's fewer and fewer people now that are, but that's a result of the information economy around us. I still think that there are people with very traditional attitudes. I think it's a very positive thing. You know, I don't have a lot to say about what's bad. Like, I really don't have any stories about, oh my God, that looks terrible. And I'm always, you know, there's always people who come in and, you know, unsafe technique. That's nothing new. There's nothing recent about that. You have to kind of, you know, make sure you create boundaries there. I don't really have anything negative to say about the sport of jiu-jitsu.
That's great. Yeah. You brought up something that I actually haven't been touching on recently in interviews, that just sparked a thought, was the competition side of it. Someone was telling me that at times there's unnecessary amount of pressure in jiu-jitsu to go compete, Whereas if you pick up a skateboard or you go surfing or most other adventures or hobbies, you don't do it and pick it up like, cool, now it's time to go prove myself to compete. What is maybe your view on competition? Necessary, not necessary? Again, maybe is it tailored to the person or a culture of a gym? What is your view on that?
I think it's necessary. And frankly, I did a lot of skateboarding and I competed in skateboarding as well. But why, right? Because you have to go find a place where people who are going to show up who you think are as good as you, if not better, right? And when you're in the camaraderie of the skate park where everyone's your buddy, or when you're in the gym and you're rolling with the same guys over and over again, there's really a place that you can't quite go with them. And now, granted, I mean, we go to the absolute edge when we're rolling it with our brothers at Ivan's place. But there's competition is one level past that because they're not your brothers anymore, right? And so and I think it's really incredibly important. Now, why is it important? It's important for promotion, right? For promotion, and I don't, sure. Yeah, you get to purple belt without competing. Okay, fine. But I wouldn't promote anybody past purple if I hadn't seen an example of them really putting themselves out there. There's probably some exceptions to that in my background, but I'm pretty sure everyone I've promoted past purple has competed and competed a lot. I think there's just this sharpening of steel that only happens when you're really afraid of getting beaten up in public in front of your mom and your girlfriend or your kids. My kids used to come watch me compete.
Oh, wow.
You watch my old videos of competition, you hear my kids, "Go, Dad!" in the background. And, I can't lose in front of them. Are you kidding me? That's not some place I would ever go if I was just rolling for the Saturday morning class. Like, I don't care about Saturday morning class. It's too informal, So I think it's incredibly, incredibly important. Now, competition has its own challenges. There's a lot of abstraction around rules. There's a lot of weirdness around rules. Rules are necessary, so it's like you're going to have to take the good with the bad with the good for competition. But I would really, really encourage folks to try that.
Cool. No, that's great to hear because to your point, the last time I competed, because lockdowns and everything, hadn't let that go on for a long time, but was it the G-Sub, and I lost right in front of all my friends and family. It's an event I've been put on, and that burns to this day, but in a way where it helps motivate me, and it showed me a flaw in my game. Did I know how to get out of the technique once he started putting this certain heel hook on me? Maybe, and I think I was at a time, but it was a mental lapse where I didn't realize in competition, if I, at that moment, if I break my concentration, I'm gonna get caught. Because I actually thought I was doing really good, and I had a moment of like, cool, I'm gonna do just fine. I'm stronger, I'm more athletic. My technique is maybe as good, but he has a different game, so our styles are fine. So I'm snapping down, doing takedowns, but I got caught in front of everyone I know, right? And so that shows you a different side of things that I may not have had otherwise.
And honestly, I think this is an important part of the jiu-jitsu experience. It's an important part of the athletics experience. Loss is a part of life. And it's way too often nowadays where we shelter people from loss. We want to tell them it's going to be okay. We want to prevent, like people raising their kids where there's no adversity. I think loss is incredibly valuable. The neuroplasticity that occurs when you screw up. That sets the stage for learning. And errors, when you make a mistake and you got caught in a heel hook, your brain became much more sensitive to going, wait a second, I have got to figure this out, right? And so it's a very positive thing. Could you imagine how shitty jiu-jitsu would be if you won every match? Like, what's the point?
Right. You
have to be afraid of the severe injury and the violence that occurs with a nasty submission for you to really, really try.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Lastly, outside of jiu-jitsu, it's been such a big part of your life and my life as well. What do you do that's good for the soul?
Good for the soul. I garden.
Okay.
Yeah, I garden. I really enjoy gardening. I started gardening probably about 2 years ago, and I'm a kind of a cheating vegan, I'll say. So everything I grow is like, it goes directly into my body, which is wonderful. So kind of a whole food vegan cook is another thing I do. It's a lot of fun. And I give credit to a couple people in my life for that, for you know, kind of buying me just the right cookbook, or kind of exposing me to the reasons behind, like why that kind of diet. But it's become very good for my soul. You know, I think honestly, you know, why do you exercise? You know, why do you eat certain foods you eat? You know, this is the vessel for your soul, man.
Yeah.
This is the vessel for your soul, and I want to be around long enough to get to know the grandchildren that aren't born yet, you know, and so I want to take good care of myself. So I do a lot. I do exercise a lot, and I'm extremely kind of flow centric and Zen centric in my exercise.
Cool.
I run a lot. I do yoga. I do weightlifting, and all of it is you know, really towards the same purpose. It is to make sure I'm as strong on the mats as possible. You know. Cool. I really enjoy tapping 20-year-olds.
Yeah. I enjoy watching you tapping 20-year-olds.
and I have to say that, like, you know, when I'm running hills here in Seattle, that's what I'm thinking of. I have to have the wind to overcome a kid who's going to, you know, regenerate, you know, and recover much faster than me. Yeah. And so, you know, there's a competitiveness in my soul as well, but there's also you know, going and I'm a software engineer by trade. Everything I've created in my profession is digital, and so going out in the backyard and like sticking my fingers in the soil, and you know, tearing at plants and encouraging them to become food is really I think in the past like 2 years, that's probably the newest, coolest thing I've done for my soul.
I really like that. Yeah, that's something when I find a home after this van life adventure, I want to get into for sure. So, Coach, I appreciate you sitting down with me. Thank you so much. I'm excited for your new adventure, and I'll come visit you in Southern California with that son, and we'll get some more training in.
We're heading out. Thanks a lot, man.
Cool. I appreciate you. Thank you, guys. Guys, if you've made it this far along, finished the interview, I just want to thank you again for supporting me along this journey, and hopefully you got something awesome out of that interview. I really enjoy doing these, learning so much about life, jiu-jitsu, and everyone has such a unique and interesting perspective. So I hope you got something out of that that you can take with you. And one last reminder, for 10% off on any Jocko Fuel products or Origin USA products, go to jockofuel.com or originusa.com. Support yourself by getting some awesome products, supplements, protein shakes, greens, all that good stuff. It helps support me along this journey, and again, supports yourself and an American-made company. So yeah, jockofuel.com. Check it out, guys. Thank you very much.